Tony Stark had faced impossible odds before. He'd built a suit in a cave with scraps. He'd flown a nuke through a wormhole into an alien armada. He'd gone toe-to-toe with gods, monsters, and his own demons. He'd stared death in the face more times than he could count, and walked away with nothing but a quip and a scotch. But nothing had prepared him for this. The anomaly appeared without warning during what should have been a routine Avengers surveillance mission. One moment, Tony was flying over the Arctic, tracking energy signatures from a suspected Hydra facility. The next, space itself screamed. The sky tore open like fabric ripping at the seams. Brilliant white light edged with crackling purple energy, spreading across the horizon like a wound in reality. Tony's HUD went haywire, sensors flooding with data that made no sense. Gravitational readings spiked off the charts, temporal distortions, dimensional instabilities. FRIDAY, what the hell am I looking at? Tony shouted over the roar of wind and energy. Unknown, boss, his AI responded, her Irish accent tight with what might have been concern if an AI could feel such things. Readings are inconsistent with any known phenomena. I recommend immediate. The wormhole pulled. Tony felt it in his bones, a force beyond physics, beyond reason, dragging him toward the breach like a black hole's event horizon. He fired thrusters at maximum burn, trying to break free, but it was like fighting a tsunami with a garden hose. Avengers, I'm being pulled into some kind of spatial anomaly, Tony transmitted. If anyone's listening, I could really use a hand here. Static. The comms were dead. The wormhole swallowed him whole. Reality shattered. Tony's consciousness fractured across impossible dimensions. He saw galaxies born and die in seconds, felt the weight of stars pressing against his suit, heard voices in languages that predated human thought. Colors that didn't exist burned themselves into his retinas. Time moved backward, forward, sideways. Then darkness. Then impact. The Mark 50 armor crashed into the sand like a meteor, cratering the desert floor and sending up a plume of dust visible for kilometers. Tony groaned, his head spinning, his entire body feeling like it had been put through a blender. Warning lights flashed across his HUD, systems rebooting, diagnostics running, damage assessments scrolling too fast to read. FRIDAY, he croaked. Status report? Multiple systems offline, boss. FRIDAY replied, her voice crackling with static. Arc reactors sustained a surge during transit, output at 73%. Nanotech reserves depleted by 18%. Communications array non-functional. GPS is not detecting any satellites. Tony blinked. What do you mean, no satellites? I mean, we're not on Earth, boss. Tony forced himself upright, sand cascading off his armor. He looked around. Desert, endless rolling dunes of pale sand stretching to the horizon in every direction. The heat was oppressive, even through his suit's environmental controls. And the sky. 2 suns hung in the sky, blazing down with merciless intensity. Okay, Tony said slowly. Okay, 2 suns. That's new. Boss, stellar analysis indicates we're in an entirely different star system, possibly an entirely different galaxy. The constellations don't match any database on record. Tony stood, servos whining as the suit adjusted to the heat and gravity. Run a full diagnostic. I need to know what we're working with. As FRIDAY worked, Tony scanned his surroundings. No signs of civilization, no landmarks, just sand, heat, and movement. His HUD highlighted thermal signatures approaching from the north. Multiple contacts, humanoid, armed. Well, Tony muttered, at least I'm not alone. He zoomed in. What he saw made him pause. Soldiers, white armor, black visors, carrying weapons that looked like oversized rifles. They moved in formation, professional, military, disciplined. But the armor was wrong. Too blocky, too primitive. And the rifles. FRIDAY. Analyze those weapons. Energy-based projectile weapons, boss. Plasma discharge, most likely. Technology is approximately 70 to 80 years behind current Stark industry standards. Tony's mind raced. So we're not just in another galaxy. We're in a galaxy with humans and energy weapons, but tech that's decades behind ours. It would appear so, boss. The soldiers spotted him. They raised their weapons, barking commands in a language Tony didn't recognize. His HUD translated automatically, advanced linguistics algorithms parsing the syntax. Halt! Identify yourself. Tony raised his hand slowly. Easy there, gentlemen. Name's Tony Stark. I'm just a guy who took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. The soldiers didn't lower their weapons. One of them, presumably the squad leader, spoke into a communicator attached to his helmet. Imperial Command, this is Scout Unit 735. We've located the crash site. Unknown armored individual detected, requesting orders. Imperial? Tony thought. Great. Space Nazis, because my day wasn't weird enough. The response came quickly. Detain the individual. Use of force authorized if necessary. The soldiers advanced. Tony sighed. You know, where I come from, please goes a long way. The squad leader aimed his rifle directly at Tony's chest. On the ground, now! Tony's HUD highlighted weak points in their armor. Joints, neck seals, helmet visors. FRIDAY ran combat simulations in milliseconds. Threat assessment, minimal. Okay, Tony said. I tried the diplomatic approach. Repulsors charged. The first blast caught the squad leader square in the chest, sending him flying backward into a dune. The other soldiers opened fire, bolts of red energy streaking toward Tony. They hit his shields and dissipated harmlessly. Seriously? Tony said, sidestepping another volley. Plasma rifles, that's adorable. He fired again. Precision shots, disabling weapons, knocking soldiers off their feet without killing them. Within 30 seconds, the entire squad was down, groaning in the sand, their weapons scattered. Tony walked over to the squad leader, who was struggling to sit up. He knelt down, his faceplate retracting to reveal his face, bruised, exhausted, but still carrying that trademark Stark smirk. Listen, Tony said. I don't know who you work for, but I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to figure out where the hell I am and how to get home. So how about you tell your boss to back off and we can all pretend this never happened? The squad leader stared at him, fear and confusion warring on his face. Then the sky lit up. Tony looked up and froze. Descending through the atmosphere, massive and impossibly angular, was a ship unlike anything Tony had ever seen. Wedge-shaped, kilometers long, bristling with weapons and hangar bays. It blotted out one of the suns as it positioned itself overhead. FRIDAY, Tony said quietly. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. Imperial-class Star Destroyer, boss. Based on energy signatures, it's a capital warship approximately 1,600 meters in length. Heavy armament, troop capacity in the tens of thousands. Tony stared. You've got to be kidding me. The Star Destroyer's hangar bays opened. Small, ball-shaped fighters streaked out. TIE fighters, his HUD labeled them. Dozens of them, screaming toward his position. Tony's faceplate snapped back into place. Okay, new plan. Run! He fired his thrusters and launched into the sky just as the TIE fighters opened fire. Green laser bolts tore through the air where he'd been standing seconds before, vaporizing sand into glass. Tony weaved through the barrage. FRIDAY, calculating trajectories, his suit dodging with superhuman precision. Boss, multiple fighters inbound. I'm reading 12, no, 15, no, 20 contacts. Yeah, I can count. FRIDAY. Tony snapped, barrel rolling to avoid another volley. He returned fire, repulsor blasts and micro-missiles streaking toward the TIE fighters. One exploded in a brilliant fireball. Another spiraled out of control, crashing into the dunes below. But more kept coming. This is insane, Tony shouted. Who sends a Star Destroyer after one guy? Boss, recommend immediate retreat. We don't have the resources for a prolonged engagement. Tony gritted his teeth. Working on it. He dove toward a canyon system he'd spotted on sensors, hoping the narrow passages would give him an advantage. The TIE fighters followed, their engines screaming like banshees. Then, from nowhere, a ship appeared. It wasn't like the Star Destroyer. This one was smaller, battered, asymmetrical. It looked like someone had welded together parts from a dozen different ships and called it a day. But it moved with impossible agility, streaking past Tony and unleashing a barrage of laser fire that shredded 3 TIE fighters in as many seconds. A voice crackled over Tony's comms, gruff, confident, with a hint of amusement. "Hey, Metal Man, you want a ride, or are you planning to sightsee until they blast you into scrap?" Tony blinked. "Who? Just get to the cargo ramp. We'll cover you." The ship, whatever it was, swung around, its rear-loading ramp dropping open. Tony saw a massive, fur-covered creature manning a gun turret, roaring as it fired at the pursuing TIE fighters. "FRIDAY, is that a Wookiee, boss, species native to the planet Kashyyyk." "A what?" "Less talking, more flying," the voice shouted. Tony made a split-second decision. Whoever these people were, they were shooting at the same guys trying to kill him, and right now, that made them friends. He angled toward the ship, dodging laser fire, and landed hard on the cargo ramp. The ramp slammed shut, and the ship accelerated, pulling away from the TIE fighters with a burst of speed that made Tony's stomach lurch. He stumbled into the ship's interior, cramped, cluttered, smelling faintly of fuel and something he couldn't identify. The Wookiee, Chewbacca, his HUD labeled, roared something that FRIDY translated as a greeting. Tony looked around, his helmet retracting again. "Okay, someone want to tell me what the hell's going on?" A man appeared from the cockpit, mid-30s, scruffy, wearing a vest over a white shirt, a blaster holstered at his hip. He had the cocky grin of someone who lived on the edge and loved every second of it. "Name's Han Solo," the man said, extending a hand. "Welcome aboard the Millennium Falcon." Tony stared at him. Then he looked at the Wookiee. Then he looked back at Han. "Yeah," Tony said slowly. "I'm definitely not in Kansas anymore." Han smirked. "Kid, I don't know what Kansas is, but you're in the Outer Rim now. And judging by the way the Empire's chasing you, you've pissed off the wrong people." "Story of my life," Tony muttered. The ship shuddered as a laser bolt grazed the shields. Han swore and sprinted back to the cockpit. "Chewie, punch it!" The Falcon lurched forward, engines roaring, and the stars outside turned into streaks of light as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Tony grabbed a handhold to steady himself, staring out the viewport at the swirling tunnel of blue-white energy. "FRIDAY, he said quietly. "Where the hell are we?" "Unknown, boss. But based on available data, we're very, very far from home." Tony exhaled slowly. Then he looked toward the cockpit, where Han and Chewbacca were arguing in a mix of English and Wookiee growls. And, despite everything, despite being stranded in another galaxy, despite nearly dying, despite the sheer impossibility of it all, Tony Stark smiled. "Well," he said, "at least it's not boring." Tony Stark had been in a lot of strange situations. He'd partied with rock stars, built weapons for the military, fought aliens in New York, and once accidentally set fire to a senator's toupee at a fundraiser. But sitting in the co-pilot's seat of a beat-up smuggling ship while a 7-foot-tall walking carpet argued with a space cowboy in a language that sounded like angry dog noises, that was new. "I'm just saying," Han Solo said, gesturing emphatically at the nav computer. "If you hadn't insisted on that detour to Ord Mantell, we wouldn't have run into Imperial patrols in the first place." Chewbacca roared back, his massive paws gesturing at the cockpit controls. FRIDY helpfully translated in Tony's HUD. "He says you're the one who insisted on smuggling Corellian whiskey through an Imperial checkpoint." Tony raised an eyebrow. "You smuggled alcohol through a military checkpoint?" Han spun his chair around, pointing at Tony. "Hey, that was a lucrative run. Would have been fine if the scanner tech hadn't been—" He paused. "Wait, you understood Chewie?" Tony tapped the side of his helmet, which he'd retracted back into the nanotech housing around his neck. "Advanced translation software. My AI's been analyzing the linguistic patterns since we boarded. She's already cracked about 47 languages from your radio chatter alone. Han blinked. Your AI? FRIDAY, Tony said. Female replacement intelligent digital assistant youth. She runs my suit, manages my tech, and occasionally reminds me to eat. Good afternoon. Captain Solo, FRIDAY said pleasantly through Tony's suit speakers. I must say, your ship's maintenance records are ambitious. Han frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Tony said, standing and running his hand along the Falcon's interior panels, that this bucket of bolts is held together by duct tape, hope, and what I'm pretty sure is chewing gum. Hey, Han snapped. The Falcon is the fastest ship in the galaxy. She made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. Tony stopped. Parsecs are a unit of distance, not time. Yeah, and? So that sentence makes no sense. Han's face went red. It makes perfect sense if you know what the Kessel Run actually. You know what? Forget it. Point is, she's fast, she's reliable, and she's gotten me out of more tight spots than I can count. Chewbacca made a skeptical noise. Okay, most of the time, Han amended. Tony couldn't help but grin. Relax, Han. I'm just busting your chops. The ship's got character. I respect that. He sat down in one of the passenger seats, the armor shifting to accommodate the movement. So, you want to tell me why the Empire's so interested in you? Or is that going to cost me extra? Han leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. Empire's interested in everyone, pal. They've got their fingers in every system, every planet, every trade route. You step out of line, they step on you. Sounds like Hydra, Tony muttered. What? Nothing. Just another group of authoritarian jackasses from back home. Tony looked at Han. But that doesn't explain why you risked your ship to save me. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. So why'd you do it? Han was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged. Let's just say I've got a soft spot for people running from the Empire, and you looked like you could use a hand. Also, Chewbacca added in Shiri Wook, we thought your armor might be worth something. Tony laughed as FRIDY translated. At least you're honest. Han shot Chewie a look. Thanks, pal. The Wookiee shrugged, unbothered. Tony studied Han for a moment. The cocky grin, the defensive posture, the way his hand never strayed far from the blaster at his hip. A survivor, a rogue. Someone who'd learned the hard way that the galaxy didn't hand out second chances. Tony knew the type. Hell, he'd been the type. All right, Tony said. Cards on the table. I'm not from your galaxy. Hell, I'm not even from your reality, as far as I can tell. Something pulled me through a wormhole, and now I'm stuck here with no way home and no idea how anything works. He gestured at the viewport, where the swirling blue of hyperspace rushed past. So how about you help me get my bearings, and I'll make it worth your while? Han's eyes narrowed. Worth my while how? Tony tapped his chest, and the arc reactor glowed faintly through his shirt. I'm a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, or at least I was before I got dumped in this sandbox. Point is, I know tech, advanced tech, the kind that could make your ship faster, tougher, and a hell of a lot harder for the Empire to catch. Han leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. You're serious? Dead serious. But I need information first. Where are we? What year is it? What's the political situation and… Tony paused. Why does everyone keep talking about the Empire like it's the boogeyman? Han and Chewbacca exchanged a look. Then Han sighed. All right. You want the full story? Buckle up, Metal Man. It's a long one. Tony sat in stunned silence, processing everything Han had just told him. The Galactic Republic, the Clone Wars, the rise of Emperor Palpatine, the Jedi Purge, the formation of the Galactic Empire, the Rebellion, the Death Star, a space station capable of destroying entire planets. Let me get this straight, Tony said slowly. You're telling me that 20 years ago, a democratic government spanning thousands of worlds got overthrown by one guy, who then turned it into a totalitarian regime. built a moon-sized superweapon, and is currently hunting down the last remnants of an ancient order of space wizards. Pretty much, Han said. And these space wizards, Jedi, they had magic powers. The Force, Han corrected. And I wouldn't call it magic. More like, I don't know, energy fields, mind tricks, that kind of thing. Tony rubbed his temples. This is insane. Welcome to the galaxy, pal. And you're telling me people can just move things with their minds? Sense the future? All because of some invisible energy field? Han shrugged. I've seen a lot of strange things in my time, Stark. The Force, it's real. I've seen what Jedi could do, and I've seen what happens to people who cross the Empire's Inquisitors. Tony filed that away for later analysis. If this Force was real, it represented an entirely new branch of physics, something beyond anything he'd encountered on Earth. The scientist in him was already running theories, but right now, he had bigger problems. Okay, Tony said. So the Empire's bad news. Got it. But you still haven't told me why you're on the run. Han hesitated. Chewbacca growled something. Han shot him a look. I was getting to that. Getting to what? Tony pressed. Han sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I'm a smuggler, all right? I move cargo for people who don't ask too many questions. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. A few months back, I took a job for Jabba the Hutt, big-time crime lord on Tatooine. Real piece of work. Slug-like, smells worse than a bantha in heat, runs half the underworld in the Outer Rim. Sounds delightful, Tony said dryly. Yeah, well, the job went south. I was hauling spice, illegal, highly profitable, when an Imperial patrol boarded my ship. I had two choices. Get arrested and spend the rest of my life in a labor camp, or dump the cargo and run. Tony's eyes widened. You dumped it. I dumped it, Han confirmed. Saved my skin, but Jabba wasn't happy. He wants his money, 100,000 credits, and if I don't pay up, he's putting a price on my head. Hell, he probably already has. Chewbacca growled in agreement. How much time do you have? Tony asked. Han grimaced. Not enough? Jabba's not exactly known for his patience. And the bounty hunters he hires? They're the best in the galaxy. Boba Fett, IG-88, Bosk. These guys don't mess around. They'll track me to the ends of the galaxy if they have to. Tony leaned back thinking. 100,000 credits. What's that in, say, Earth currency? No idea what Earth currency is, Han said. But 100,000 credits, that's enough to buy a small ship, set yourself up for life, or get yourself killed trying to earn it. So not pocket change. Not even close. Tony drummed his fingers on the armrest. And if you don't pay, Jabba kills you. Or worse, Han said quietly. Jabba's creative when it comes to making examples. The cockpit fell silent except for the hum of the hyperdrive. Then Tony smiled. Well, he said, lucky for you, I'm pretty good at solving impossible problems. Han raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? I'm talking about paying off your debt. Han laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. You just got here. You don't have credits. You don't even know how this galaxy works. True, Tony admitted. But I've got something better than credits. Yeah? What's that? Tony tapped his chest again, the arc reactor glowing brighter. Technology Jabba the Hutt has never seen. Tech that could make him the most powerful crime lord in the Outer Rim. Hell, in the entire galaxy. Han stared at him. You're serious? Dead serious. Look, I need a way to survive in this galaxy while I figure out how to get home. You need money to clear your debt and get Jabba off your back. This is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Tony grinned. Besides, I've negotiated with worse than a giant slug. Trust me. Chewbacca made a contemplative noise. Han looked at his co-pilot. What do you think, Chewie? The Wookiee growled something long and thoughtful. Friday translated. He says the plan is insane, reckless, and likely to get you both killed. But he also says it's the most interesting thing you've suggested in months. Han snorted. High praise. Tony extended his hand. So, do we have a deal? Han looked at the hand, then at Tony, then at Chewbacca. Then he grinned. A wide, reckless grin that told Tony everything he needed to know about Han Solo. What the hell? Han said, shaking Tony's hand. I've made worse decisions. Great, Tony said. Now, first things first. I need to take a look at your ship's systems. If we're going to walk into Jabba's palace, we need every advantage we can get. Han frowned. What kind of advantages? Tony stood, his eyes gleaming with the kind of manic energy that preceded every one of his best and worst ideas. Shields, weapons upgrades, stealth capabilities. And maybe, a little surprise for anyone stupid enough to follow us. Han's grin widened. I'm starting to like you, Stark. Everyone does, Tony said. Eventually. Boba Fett's ship, Slave Eye, drifted silently through the void, its sensors scanning nearby hyperspace lanes. Inside the cockpit, the legendary bounty hunter sat motionless, his T-visored helmet reflecting the cold light of distant stars. A hologram flickered to life. Jabba the Hutt, massive and grotesque, his bulk dominating the projection. Fett, Jabba rumbled in Huttese. Progress report. I've tracked Solo's last known hyperspace vector, Boba Fett said, his voice flat and emotionless. He jumped from Tatooine's orbit approximately 3 hours ago. Trajectory suggests he's heading toward the outer rim. Good. Bring him to me. Alive if possible. Dead, if necessary. Understood. Jabba leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And Fett, there are reports of an unknown armored warrior traveling with Solo. Someone who destroyed an entire Imperial patrol single-handedly. Find out who or what this individual is. Boba Fett's hand moved to the weapons controls. I will. The hologram cut out. Fett sat in silence for a moment, processing the information. Then he activated the ship's targeting computer and began plotting intercept courses. Whoever this armored warrior was, they would soon learn what it meant to be hunted by Boba Fett. And no one escaped Boba Fett. Tony knelt beside an access panel, his helmet extended again, scanning the Falcon's internal systems while FRIDAY mapped the ship's schematics. Okay, Tony muttered. This is worse than I thought. Han leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. What's worse? Your hyperdrive is held together by willpower and spite. Your shield generators are running at maybe 60% efficiency, and your targeting computer, Tony paused, is literally a modified astromech interface from a ship that's probably older than I am. Han bristled. The Falcon has character. The Falcon has problems, Tony corrected. But don't worry, I can fix her. He pulled a small device from his gauntlet, a Stark Industries fabricator module, designed for field repairs. Nanotech swarmed over the access panel, integrating with the ship's systems. Han watched, fascinated despite himself. What are you doing? Upgrading your power distribution network, rerouting energy flow to prioritize shields and engines. And, Tony grinned, installing a little something I like to call a cloaking matrix. A what? Stealth tech. Makes you invisible to most sensors. Won't fool a dedicated scan, but it'll buy you time. Han's eyes widened. You can do that? I can do a lot of things, Tony said. Just wait. Chewbacca appeared, carrying a tray of what looked like food. He set it down and watched Tony work, rumbling curiously. He wants to know, FRIDAY translated, if you're always this reckless. Tony laughed. Tell him yes, and that it usually works out. Chewbacca snorted, unconvinced. Tony worked in silence for a few more minutes, then stood, wiping his hands. All right, that should do it. Try firing up the shields. Han moved to the cockpit and activated the controls. The Falcon's shields hummed to life, brighter, stronger, more stable than before. Han stared at the readings. How did you... Genius, remember? Tony said. Now, let's talk about Jabba. What's the plan? Han turned, his expression serious. We go to Tatooine, we walk into his palace, and we convince him to clear my debt before he feeds us to his pet Rancor. Rancor? Big, ugly, eats people. Fantastic, Tony said dryly. And how exactly do we convince a crime lord to forgive 100,000 credits? Han looked at Tony's glowing arc reactor. Then he smiled, with a really impressive gift. Tony grinned back. Now you're speaking my language. The twin suns of Tatooine blazed against the viewport as the Millennium Falcon dropped out of hyperspace. Tony stood behind Han's pilot seat, arms crossed, studying the desert planet below. Even from orbit, he could see the endless expanse of sand, the rocky outcroppings, the scattered settlements clinging to survival in one of the harshest environments he'd ever seen. Home sweet home, Han muttered sarcastically. You're from here? Tony asked. Hell no, but I've been here enough times to hate it. Han adjusted the approach vector, angling toward the planet's surface. Tatooine's a backwater. No law except what the Hutts enforce. Perfect place for smugglers, bounty hunters, and people who don't want to be found. And giant crime lords who keep man-eating monsters as pets, Tony added. That too, Chewbacca growled something from the co-pilot's seat. Friday, translated. He's reminding you that the last time you visited Jabba, you barely escaped with your ship intact. Han shot his co-pilot a glare. Thanks for the vote of confidence, buddy. Tony's HUD displayed the planet's surface, settlements, moisture farms, and one particularly large structure on the outskirts of the Dune Sea, Jabba's palace. It looked like a massive, squat fortress, half buried in the sand, with cylindrical towers jutting up like the teeth of some buried beast. That's it? Tony asked, highlighting the structure. That's it, Han confirmed. Jabba's palace. Beautiful on the outside, nightmare fuel on the inside. Comforting. Tony's sensors swept the area. Heavy fortifications, guard towers. What looked like anti-aircraft emplacements and thermal signatures, lots of them. Armed guards, creatures, things he couldn't immediately identify. This place is a fortress, Tony observed. Jabba doesn't take chances, Han said. He's got enemies everywhere. Rival crime lords, bounty hunters looking for a payday, rebels who think he's funding the Empire, which he probably is. So yeah, he's paranoid. Can't say I blame him. Tony glanced at Han. You sure about this? We could just jump back into hyperspace, find another way. Han shook his head. There is no other way. Jabba's reach extends across half the outer rim. I run, he'll just send more hunters. Better to face him now, on our terms. Our terms being walking into his home with nothing but a shiny trinket and a prayer? Pretty much. Tony grinned. You know what? I've done dumber things. Let's do it. The Falcon touched down on a makeshift landing pad a few kilometers from the palace, kicking up clouds of sand. The ramp lowered, and Tony stepped out first, his armor gleaming in the harsh sunlight. The heat hit him immediately. Brutal, oppressive, dry. His suit's environmental systems kicked in, cooling him down, but even through the armor, he could feel Tatooine trying to bake him alive. How do people live here? Tony asked. Carefully, Han said, descending the ramp with Chewbacca behind him. And with a lot of water. Tony scanned the horizon. The palace loomed in the distance, its silhouette wavering in the heat haze. So what's the play? Han checked his blaster, then holstered it. We walk in, respectfully. Jabba's got a thing for protocol. He likes people to grovel a little. We show him the tech you've got, make our pitch, and hope he's in a good mood. And if he's not, then we run, fast. Chewbacca growled in agreement, his bowcaster slung over his shoulder. Tony activated his HUD, analyzing the palace's defenses. I'm reading approximately 50 life signs inside, armed, some human, some not. Jabba's court, Han explained. Criminals, mercenaries, dancers, advisors, all of them loyal to him because he pays well and kills anyone who crosses him. He glanced at Tony. Just follow my lead. Don't insult anyone, don't touch anything, and whatever you do, don't stare at the Twi'lek dancers. Tony raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because Jabba gets jealous, and jealous Hutts are dangerous Hutts. Noted. They began walking toward the palace. The sand shifted beneath their feet, and the wind carried the faint smell of something rotten. One more thing, Han said. When we get inside, let me do the talking. Jabba knows me. He doesn't know you, and he really doesn't like surprises. Then I'll be the good surprise, Tony said. The kind that makes him rich and powerful instead of the kind that explodes in his face. Han smirked. Let's hope so. The palace entrance was guarded by 2 Gamorrean guards, massive pig-like creatures wearing spiked armor and carrying vibro axes. They grunted as Han, Tony, and Chewbacca approached. We're here to see Jabba, Han said in heavily accented Huttese. The guards exchanged glances. One of them spoke into a comlink, then nodded. The massive door groaned open, revealing a dark corridor lit by flickering torches. Charming, Tony muttered. They stepped inside. The corridor was oppressive, narrow, hot, smelling of sweat and decay. The walls were covered in what looked like ancient carvings, depicting scenes of Hutt dominance and suffering. Jabba's got a flair for the dramatic, Han whispered. I've noticed. They descended deeper into the palace, passing more guards, more strange creatures lurking in the shadows. Tony's sensors detected droids, protocol units, astromechs, and what looked like modified security droids armed with blasters. Finally, they reached the throne room. The door slid open, and Tony's breath caught. The room was massive. Vaulted ceilings, pillars carved from sandstone, a raised dais at the far end. And on that dais, lounging on a massive platform surrounded by cushions, chains, and attendants, was Jabba the Hutt. Tony had seen a lot of things in his life, but nothing quite prepared him for the sheer presence of Jabba. The hut was enormous, easily 4 meters long, slug-like, with mottled green-brown skin glistening with moisture. His eyes were small, predatory, intelligent. His mouth was wide, filled with teeth, and he exuded an aura of casual menace that made Tony's instincts scream, danger. Around him, the court bustled with activity. Dancers moved to alien music. Guards stood at attention. A protocol droid, golden, fussy-looking, hovered near Jabba's side, translating. And chained to Jabba's throne was a Twi'lek woman. Green-skinned, beautiful, dressed in a metal bikini, her expression carefully neutral. Tony's jaw tightened. Easy, Han whispered. Don't react. Jabba's eyes swiveled toward them. He rumbled something in Huttese, deep, wet, unpleasant. The protocol droid stepped forward. His Excellency, Jabba the Hutt, acknowledges your presence, Captain Solo. He is curious as to why you dare show your face here without his money. Han stepped forward, hands raised. Your Excellency, I know I owe you, but I've brought something better than credits. Something that'll make you the most powerful being in the Outer Rim. Jabba's laugh was like gravel sliding down a wet pipe. He gestured dismissively. The droid translated. His Excellency has heard such promises before, from smugglers, from liars, from dead men. Han didn't flinch. This isn't a promise, it's a guarantee, and the proof's standing right next to me. All eyes turned to Tony. Jabba leaned forward, his massive bulk shifting. He studied Tony with unnerving intensity, his eyes narrowing. Then he spoke, slowly, deliberately. The droid translated. His Excellency wishes to know what manner of creature you are. Your armor is unlike anything in his collection. Your presence is unusual. Tony's faceplate retracted, revealing his face. He met Jabba's gaze without fear. Name's Tony Stark, he said. And I'm not from around here. Way not from around here. But what I am is the guy who's about to make you an offer you can't refuse. The court went silent. Jabba's eyes gleamed. Go on, the droid translated. Tony stepped forward, his arc reactor glowing. You've got power, territory, wealth, But you've also got competition, rival crime lords, the Empire breathing down your neck, bounty hunters who'd sell you out for the right price. He gestured around the throne room. Your defenses are good, but they're not great. Jabba's expression darkened. Several guards raised their weapons. Careful, Stark, Han hissed. Tony ignored him. I can make them great. I can give you technology that'll make your enemies think twice before crossing you. Shields that can withstand orbital bombardment. Weapons that can vaporize a starship. Surveillance systems that'll let you see everything happening in your territory, all the time. Jabba tilted his head, intrigued. But, Tony continued, I'm not giving this tech away for free. I'm offering a trade. You wipe Han's debt clean, completely. And in return, I give you one piece of Stark Industries' finest. He raised his gauntlet. Nanotech flowed over his hand, forming a small, compact device. A miniaturized energy shield generator, no bigger than a datapad. This, Tony said, is a portable shield generator, compact, powerful, nearly indestructible. Strap it to your guards, your droids, your ships. Hell, strap it to yourself, and you'll be untouchable. He activated it. A shimmering blue field sprang to life, surrounding him in a translucent dome. The court gasped. Tony deactivated the shield and tossed the device to Jabba's feet. That's yours. Free sample. Test it. Shoot it. Try to break it. You won't. Jabba stared at the device. Then he gestured to one of his guards, a massive, armored Weequay mercenary. The guard picked up the shield generator, activated it, and stood in the center of the room. Jabba barked an order. Two other guards raised their blasters and fired. The energy bolts hit the shield and dissipated harmlessly. The court erupted in murmurs. Jabba leaned back, his expression shifting from suspicion to greed. He spoke. The droid translated. His Excellency is impressed. However, he wishes to see a demonstration of your personal capabilities to ensure this is not merely a trick. Tony grinned. You want a show? I'll give you a show. He turned to Han. You might want to step back. Han and Chewbacca moved to the side. Tony's faceplate snapped back into place. His repulsors charged. FRIDI, target selection, non-lethal, maximum intimidation. Acknowledged, boss. Tony's HUD highlighted targets. Decorative pillars, hanging braziers, a statue of a Hutt ancestor. He fired. Repulsor blasts lanced out with surgical precision. A pillar exploded into dust. A brazier flew across the room, scattering embers. The statue's head separated from its body and crashed to the floor. The court screamed. Guards raised weapons, but Jabba raised a hand, stopping them. Tony hovered in midair, repulsors glowing, every inch the armored warrior from another world. That, he said, his voice amplified by the suit's speakers, was 10% power. I can level this entire palace if I want to, but I'm not here to fight. I'm here to deal. He landed, his boots clanking against the stone floor. So, do we have an agreement? Jabba stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then he laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the room. He spoke. The droid translated, barely able to keep up. His Excellency agrees. Captain Solo's debt is forgiven. In exchange, you will provide His Excellency with one shield generator and instructions for its operation. Han exhaled in relief. Tony nodded. Deal, Jabba gestured. And the protocol droid produced a datapad. His Excellency requires your signature or equivalent to formalize the agreement. Tony took the datapad, scanned the contract with his HUD, then pressed his gauntlet to the screen. Nanotech flowed over the surface, creating a unique digital signature. Done, Tony said, handing it back. Jabba rumbled something that sounded almost like approval. The droid translated. His Excellency invites you to stay for refreshments, as his guests. Han visibly relaxed. We'd be honored. Tony glanced at the chained Twi'lek woman. Her eyes met his, pleading, desperate. He made a decision. Actually, Tony said, There's one more thing. Jabba's eyes narrowed. The woman, Tony said, pointing to the Twi'lek. Let her go. The throne room went deathly silent. Han's eyes widened. Stark, what are you doing? Jabba's expression darkened. He spoke, low, dangerous. The droid translated. His Excellency says the slave is his property, not for negotiation. Tony's jaw tightened. Then negotiate. I've got more tech where that shield came from. A lot more. You want weapons, surveillance, medical equipment that can save lives your doctors can't? I've got it all. But the woman goes free. Non-negotiable. Jabba stared at Tony. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then Jabba laughed again, darker this time. He spoke. The droid hesitated, then translated. His Excellency admires your audacity. Very well, the slave is yours. But know this, metal man. His Excellency does not forget debts. If you return to Tatooine, he will expect more gifts, more wonders. Disappoint him, and you will join the Rancor's next meal. Tony didn't blink. Understood. Jabba gestured, and a guard unlocked the Twi'lek's chain. She stumbled forward, free for the first time in who knew how long. Tony caught her arm, steadying her. You okay? She stared at him, tears in her eyes. You freed me? Yeah, Tony said. Consider it a bonus. Jabba rumbled one final command. The droid translated. His Excellency declares this audience concluded. You may leave, with his blessings. Han grabbed Tony's arm. Let's go, now, before he changes his mind. They turned and walked out, the Twi'lek woman stumbling between them. Behind them, Jabba watched with unreadable eyes, and in the shadows, Boba Fett stepped forward, his armor gleaming. Shall I follow them? He asked in Huttis. Jabba considered. Then he shook his massive head. No, let them go, for now. Boba Fett nodded and melted back into the shadows, but his eyes never left the doorway where Tony Stark had disappeared. Tony, Han, Chewbacca, and the freed Twi'lek woman hurried across the sand toward the Falcon. Are you insane? Han hissed. You just strong-armed Jabba the Hutt. And it worked, Tony said. This time, next time, he'll feed you to something worse than a Rancor. Tony stopped, turning to face Han. Then I guess we won't come back. Han stared at him. Then he laughed, a wild, disbelieving sound. You're crazy, Stark. Absolutely crazy. I've been told, Tony said with a grin. The Twi'lek woman touched Tony's arm. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. Tony's expression softened. You don't owe me anything. Just find somewhere safe. Somewhere far from here. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. They reached the Falcon. And that's when the alarm started blaring. Boss, Friday said urgently. I'm detecting multiple ships entering the atmosphere. Imperial signatures, Star Destroyers. Tony's blood ran cold. How many? 3. And they're launching TIE fighters, lots of them. Han swore. They tracked us. Tony's faceplate snapped down. Everyone on board, now! They sprinted up the ramp. The Falcon roared to life. And above them, the sky filled with fire. The Millennium Falcon lifted off in a cloud of sand and fury, engines screaming as Han pushed the throttle to maximum. Chewie, angle the deflectors, double front, Han barked. Tony stood in the cockpit doorway, his armor fully deployed, watching the sky turn into a nightmare. 3 Imperial Star Destroyers hung in low orbit like predatory gods, their undersides bristling with turbo-laser batteries. And pouring from their hangar bays like a swarm of angry insects came the TIE fighters, dozens of them, their distinctive scream cutting through the atmosphere. Friday count, Tony ordered. 43 TIE fighters and counting, boss. 3 Imperial-class Star Destroyers, and I'm detecting a unique energy signature. She paused. Boss, one of those Star Destroyers is different, larger, more heavily armed. A Super Star Destroyer? Han asked, his voice tight. Negative, Friday said. but it's broadcasting Imperial command frequencies. Whoever's on that ship is important. Tony's HUD highlighted the lead destroyer. Through the enhanced optics, he could see the bridge and a single figure standing at the viewport, backlit by the ship's interior lights. Tall, dark armor, a flowing cape. Even from this distance, Tony felt something, a presence, heavy and oppressive, like standing too close to a black hole. "Who is that?" Tony asked quietly. Han's hands tightened on the controls. "That's Darth Vader." The name meant nothing to Tony. "Who?" "The Emperor's right hand, the most dangerous man in the galaxy, a Sith Lord." Han glanced back at Tony, his face pale. "If Vader's here personally, we're in serious trouble." Chewbacca roared something that Friday translated as extremely profane. Tony's mind raced. "Why would he come after us? We're just—" "You destroyed an Imperial patrol," Han interrupted. "You've got tech they've never seen, and you just made a deal with one of the galaxy's most powerful crime lords." He yanked the controls, and the Falcon banked hard, avoiding a volley of turbo laser fire. "You're a threat, Stark, and the Empire doesn't tolerate threats." Tony swore under his breath. "Okay, new plan. I'm listening. Get us to orbit. I'll handle the fighters." Han's eyes widened. "You're going to fight 40 TIE fighters? Alone?" Tony's faceplate gleamed. "I've fought worse odds." "When?" "New York, 2012. Long story." Tony moved toward the cargo bay. "Just get us into space. I'll buy you the time you need." "Stark, wait!" But Tony was already at the cargo ramp. He slapped the control, and the ramp dropped open, wind and heat, and the scream of engines flooding in. Below, Tatooine's desert rushed past at impossible speed. Above, the TIE fighters closed in, green laser fire stitching through the air. Tony took a breath. Then he jumped. Tony Stark fell through the sky like a comet. Wind tore at his armor. Atmospheric friction heated his hull plating. The ground spiraled below him, and the TIE fighters swarmed above. Friday, full combat mode, target prioritization, closest threats first. Acknowledged, boss. Weapon systems online. Arc reactor output at 92%. Tony's HUD lit up with targeting reticles. The TIE fighters broke formation, 12 of them peeling off to engage him. He stabilized mid-air, repulsors flaring, and brought himself to a hover 3,000 meters above the desert. The TIE fighters screamed toward him, their twin ion engines shrieking. Tony grinned inside his helmet. "All right, boys, let's dance." He fired. Repulsor blasts and micro-missiles streaked out in a deadly pattern. The first TIE fighter exploded in a brilliant fireball. The second took a direct hit to its cockpit. The pilot vaporized instantly. The third tried to evade, but Tony anticipated the move, adjusting his aim mid-flight and punching a hole through its solar panel. The fighter spiraled out of control and crashed into the sand below. "3 down," Tony said. 39 to go. The remaining fighters adapted, spreading out, trying to surround him. Tony dove, accelerating toward the ground at terminal velocity. The TIE fighters followed, firing wildly, their shots cutting through the air where he'd been milliseconds before. At the last possible second, Tony pulled up, skimming mere meters above the sand. The TIE fighters weren't as agile. 2 of them couldn't adjust in time and slammed into the desert, exploding in twin fireballs. 5 down. Tony climbed again, his repulsors pushing him into a vertical ascent. He spun mid-flight, firing behind him, and caught another TIE fighter square in the cockpit. It detonated, debris raining down. "Boss," Friday warned. "The Falcon is taking fire. Multiple hits to the rear deflector shields." Tony glanced up. The Falcon was climbing hard toward orbit, but a squadron of TIE fighters was on its tail, hammering it with laser fire. "Not on my watch," Tony muttered. He angled upward, pouring power into his thrusters, and rocketed toward the Falcon's pursuers. He closed the distance in seconds, slamming into the formation like a missile. His gauntlets glowed with repulsor energy. He grabbed the nearest TIE fighter's solar panel and tore it off, the fighter spinning wildly before exploding. He fired point blank into another fighter's cockpit, then used the wreckage as a shield, slamming it into a third fighter. "Jesus, Stark!" Han's voice crackled over the comms. "You're insane!" "I get that a lot," Tony shouted back, dodging a laser bolt by centimeters. "Just keep flying." The Falcon punched through the upper atmosphere, its shields flaring as it broke into the black of space. Tony followed, trailing a dozen TIE fighters like angry hornets. And ahead, looming impossibly large, was the Imperial fleet. The transition from atmosphere to vacuum was jarring. Sound cut out, replaced by the eerie silence of space. Tony's HUD adjusted, compensating for the lack of air resistance. The Star Destroyers hung in formation, their hulls glittering with running lights. Turbo lasers tracked the Falcon, preparing to fire. "Boss," FRIDAY said urgently. "The lead destroyer is charging a tractor beam. If they lock onto the Falcon..." "They won't," Tony said. He accelerated, pushing his suit to its limits, and angled toward the lead destroyer, the one carrying Darth Vader. "Stark, what are you doing?" Han shouted. "Creating a distraction," Tony shot back. "Get ready to jump to hyperspace. We need time to calculate. Then calculate fast." Tony streaked toward the destroyer, TIE fighters in pursuit. The massive ship's point defense turret swiveled toward him, opening fire. Turbo laser bolts the size of cars lanced through space, and Tony weaved through them like a fighter pilot on adrenaline. "FRIDAY, what's the power output on those guns?" "Approximately 500 megajoules per shot, boss. A direct hit would overload your shields and likely kill you. So don't get hit. Got it." He dove toward the destroyer's superstructure, skimming along the hull, his repulsors leaving glowing trails on the metal. Point defense cannons tracked him, firing, but he was too fast, too small, too unpredictable. He found what he was looking for, a shield generator node, jutting from the destroyer's surface like a tumor. "Let's see how you like this," Tony muttered. He fired a concentrated repulsor blast directly into the generator. The node exploded, and a section of the destroyer's shields flickered and died. Alarms blared across the Imperial ship. Darth Vader stood at the viewport, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the armored figure streak across the void. Around him, officers shouted orders, coordinating the fleet's response. "My lord," the ship's captain said, approaching cautiously. "The unknown fighter has damaged our forward shield generator. Should we deploy additional squadrons?" Vader didn't turn. "No." The captain blinked. "My lord, this warrior is unusual." Vader's voice was deep, mechanical, resonating through his mask. "Their technology is advanced, their tactics aggressive. They fight without fear." He extended a hand, and through the Force, he reached toward Tony Stark, and felt nothing. No presence in the Force. No connection to the living energy that bound the galaxy together. This being was a void, a blank space where there should have been life. Vader tilted his head, intrigued, curious. "My lord, your orders?" Vader lowered his hand. "Let them run. For now." "But..." Vader turned, and the captain fell silent, the weight of the Dark Lord's gaze crushing his protests. "This warrior will return," Vader said quietly. "And when they do, I will be ready." He looked back at the viewport, watching Tony Stark dance through the void. "Retrieve any debris from the battle," Vader commanded. "Analyze their technology. I want to know what they are." The captain saluted. "Yes, my lord." Vader returned his gaze to the stars, and deep within the Force, he felt the stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. "Hyperdrive coordinates locked," Han shouted. "Chewie, punch it!" Chewbacca roared and pulled the lever. The stars stretched into lines, and the Falcon leaped into hyperspace. Tony staggered into the cockpit, his armor retracting into its housing. His face was pale, streaked with sweat, but his eyes were alive with adrenaline. "Did we make it?" he asked, breathing hard. Han turned in his seat, staring at Tony like he'd just seen a ghost. "You just took on an entire Imperial fleet, alone." Tony shrugged, wincing. "I've had worse Tuesdays." Chewbacca made a sound that was half laugh, half disbelief. The Twi'lek woman, whose name Tony had learned was Ula, sat in the back, clutching a blanket, staring at Tony with wide eyes. "You saved us," she whispered. "All of us." Tony collapsed into a seat, exhausted. "Yeah, well. Couldn't let Vader ruin our dramatic exit." Han leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Vader, Darth Vader came after us. Do you have any idea what that means?" "It means we pissed off the wrong people," Tony said. "Story of my life." "This isn't a joke, Stark. Vader doesn't just show up for random smugglers. He came for you. Because of what you did. Because of what you are." Tony met Han's eyes. "Then we'll deal with it. Together." Han stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You really are crazy. And you're still alive," Tony shot back. "Debt-free, I might add." Han's grin widened. Yeah, I am." He extended his hand. "Thanks, Stark. I mean it." Tony shook it. "Don't mention it, literally. Because if Jabba hears I was the reason you got off the hook, he'll want more favors." "Too late," Han said. "You're on his radar now, which means you're officially part of the Outer Rim's most wanted." "Great," Tony muttered. "Add it to the list." Chewbacca rumbled something. FRIDAY, translated. "He says you're officially part of the crew now, whether you like it or not." Tony looked at the Wookiee, then at Han, then at Ula. And despite everything, despite being stranded in another galaxy, despite nearly dying, despite making an enemy of the most powerful regime in the stars, Tony Stark smiled. "You know what? I could get used to this." Slave Eye drifted silently through the void, its sensors tracking the Falcon's hyperspace signature. Boba Fett sat in the cockpit, his helmet resting on the console beside him, his scarred face illuminated by the glow of the instruments. He'd watched the entire battle from a distance, watched the armored warrior tear through TIE fighters like they were nothing, watched them cripple a Star Destroyer, watched them escape. Impressive. Fett picked up his helmet and placed it back on his head. Then he activated a secure channel. Jabba's image appeared, holographic, distorted, massive. "Fett," the Hutt rumbled. "Report." "Solo escaped," Boba Fett said flatly. "But the debt is cleared, by the Armored One." Jabba's eyes gleamed. "And the Empire?" "Vader himself pursued them. They escaped." Jabba laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. "The Metal Man is more dangerous than I thought. Keep watching, Fett. I want to know where they go, what they do, and when the time comes, I want them brought to me. Alive? Preferably. But if not," Jabba's grin widened, "their technology will suffice." The transmission ended. Boba Fett stared at the star field. Then he programmed Slave Eyes, tracking computer, and began following the Falcon's trail. Wherever Tony Stark went, Boba Fett would follow. It was only a matter of time. The Millennium Falcon streaked through hyperspace, carrying 3 unlikely companions toward an uncertain future. Tony Stark stood at the viewport, watching the swirling blue tunnel rush past. His arc reactor glowed softly, a reminder of home, a home that felt impossibly far away now. "Boss," FRIDAY said quietly, "I've completed my analysis of the spatial anomaly that brought us here. And the wormhole has collapsed completely. I cannot detect any residual energy signatures. Without a stable rift or a known quantum anchor, I cannot calculate a return trajectory." Tony closed his eyes. "So we're stuck." "For the foreseeable future, yes." He exhaled slowly. Okay. We work with what we've got." Behind him, Han and Chewbacca were arguing about their next destination, somewhere called the Anoat system, where Han claimed they could lay low for a while. Ula sat quietly, free for the first time in years, staring at her hands like she couldn't quite believe it. Tony turned away from the viewport and joined them. "All right," he said. "If I'm stuck in this galaxy, I need to know everything. The Empire, the Rebellion, the Force, all of it." Han raised an eyebrow. "Planning to start a revolution, Stark?" Tony grinned. "Planning to survive. But if I happen to piss off a few more Imperials along the way..." He shrugged. "Well, I've never been good at keeping my head down." Han laughed. "You're going to fit right in." Chewbacca growled in agreement. Tony looked at each of them. This strange crew he'd fallen in with. This makeshift family forged in the fires of necessity and survival. And he realized something. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. "FRIDAY," Tony said quietly. "Start logging everything. Every planet, every species, every piece of tech. If we're stuck here, we're going to learn everything we can." "Acknowledged, boss." Han clapped Tony on the shoulder. "So, what now?" Tony thought for a moment. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that usually preceded either genius or catastrophe. "Now," he said, "we find out just how much trouble one genius billionaire can cause in a galaxy far, far away." Across the galaxy, aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer, Darth Vader stood alone in his meditation chamber. Before him, suspended in a stasis field, was a fragment of Tony's armor, a small piece of nanotech recovered from the battlefield on Tatooine. Vader reached out through the Force, probing the technology, searching for understanding. The metal resisted him. It held no life, no presence. It was simply technology. Advanced beyond anything the Empire possessed. But it was not alive. "What are you?" Vader murmured. The metal, of course, did not answer. But Vader knew one thing with absolute certainty. This armored warrior, this Tony Stark, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And in a galaxy ruled by the Sith, by the dark side of the Force, by ancient power and forbidden knowledge. Sometimes the greatest threat came not from mystical energy or ancient prophecy. Sometimes it came from a man with a brilliant mind and the will to use it. Vader closed his fist around the nanotech fragment. "We will meet again, Metal Man," he said quietly. "And when we do, I will understand what you truly are." The meditation chamber sealed shut, and in the darkness, Darth Vader began to plan. Tony Stark had paid off Han Solo's debt to Jabba the Hutt, but in doing so, he had drawn the attention of forces far more dangerous than any crime lord. The Empire now knew he existed. Darth Vader had marked him as a target, and somewhere in the shadows, bounty hunters waited for their chance to claim the ultimate prize. Tony Stark was stranded in a galaxy at war, with no way home and enemies closing in from every direction. But he wasn't afraid, because if there was one thing Tony Stark excelled at, it was beating impossible odds. He'd built an empire from nothing. He'd fought gods and monsters. He'd saved his world more times than he could count. And now, in this strange new galaxy, he would do it all over again. The debt was paid. But the adventure? That was just beginning. Han Solo leaned back in the pilot's seat, watching the hyperspace tunnel rush past. "You know," he said to Chewbacca, "I've got a feeling things are about to get a lot more interesting around here." Chewbacca roared in agreement. And somewhere in the back of the ship, Tony Stark was already sketching designs for his next invention. Because in a galaxy full of Force users, planet-killing superweapons, and tyrannical empires, sometimes all you needed was a genius with a really good idea. And Tony Stark had plenty of those. The stars stretched endlessly before them. And the future, uncertain, dangerous, thrilling, awaited.